It is 8:30 Pacific time, whatever that time is where you are. That means we're going to get started. And today we're going through MREA Session 5, Part 2, the last two of the four models. We're going through specifically today pages 152 through 172. Now, I trust that you have your copy of the MREA book out in front of you because we're going to be diving in. We're going to be taking lots of notes. I have a lot of worksheets for you guys. I've posted some of those in the Facebook Mastermind group now. So depending on when you're watching this, they might be at the top of the feed. You also, the fastest way there to find what I'm going to share with you today and find those files that you can use to make this real in your business is to go into the Facebook Mastermind group and click on the files button or the files link, and it'll take you to all uploaded files that we've sent in or put into that group. All right, so let's go ahead and jump in. So guys, today we are talking about the last two of the four models. Now, what we know is these models are big. These models are the core of what a big business is built upon, and yet a lot of people don't take the time to go through, understand, and apply these models in their own business. So that's what we're going to do today. That's what we're going to attempt to change today. Now, look with me, if you will, page 152, specifically on the budget model. Now, guys, this is a big one. And like Gary says, he jokes in this book, like Gary says, this is where a lot of people yawn. Yet this is also where a lot of people spend a little bit extra time and get a big reward for doing so. This is the language of your business. Your budget and your P&L, the numbers of your business are what tell the story. So what are you doing to prepare your business for it? Look on page 152. Middle of the page, under the section of Model 3, your budget model, he says, your budget model is about understanding what happens to your money between the time you receive it as gross revenue and keep it as net income. Now, if you're like most agents, most people, there's a big discrepancy between gross and net. And if you are like me and you've been in this business for a long time, you know a lot of agents who have a really good gross number. They gross a lot of income, yet they don't net a lot. They gross a lot, but they don't net a lot. They look really good on paper, yet they're scraping by to pay their bills. The reason they have that challenge is because they don't have a strong budget model incorporated into their business. That's what we're going to dive into next. Now, what you're going to see there is Gary's next thing is cost versus investment towards the bottom of 152. Then it continues on to 153 as well. Now, here's what I want you to take from this. This isn't just semantics. This is a big difference. How do you see the money that your business spends? Do you see it as a cost or do you see it as an investment? Now, what we know is either is probably accurate, and yet one serves you at a higher level than the other. When we look at the money we're spending in our business, the money that our business is spending, because those expenditures happen up here. They happen before we get paid down here. It's also another trap most agents make. How do we look at that money? You know, somebody that looks at something as a cost, well, they look at it one time, they see it as a cost, they probably don't like the fact that it costs them money, and they probably don't circle back and check that out again. Now, versus somebody that sees expenditures of the business as investments, well, they look at this totally differently. Now, look at page 153. And this is Gary's point. 153 in the middle of 153 says this. He says, your philosophy should be that for every dollar invested in a business expense, you should receive some multiple of that dollar back. Dollar for dollar isn't enough. Now, what's he saying there? Guys, here's what he's saying. It's going to take money to make money, yes. Now, a lot of people take that the wrong way. A lot of people take that and they think it gives them license to spend money really, really, really irresponsibly. That's not what he's saying. What he's saying is to operate any business, there are expenses. Yet, when we choose, as prudent business people, when we choose to see every one of those expenses as investment, it means that we then look for a return. And I've heard Gary say this for years since I've been at KW. I've heard him say it for years, that dollar for dollar is not good enough. And yet, here's what we know. We know a lot of agents, I would argue most agents, don't track the return on the investment that they make. They don't track the return on the expenses that their business is paying. And as a result, they don't get great results. As a result, they're throwing great money after bad. Now, let me tell you a quick story. I brought a person into a company I was working at, and I used these models to help coach and consult this person. Now, this person came from very traditional real estate company. That's not good. That's not bad. It's just different. They came from that background. And in that model, in that office specifically, they didn't teach them about being a business owner. They taught him that you have cards and you have a phone and you have free coffee in the office and you show up and you do your thing and you hope for the best. That was the business planning that was happening. Now, they came to our model, and this team was very successful. Mind you, one of the more successful in the market area. Very successful team. They weren't hurting for money. Yet when we actually walked through this process together and they started holding their money accountable, they found that over 70% of their expense was going into something, i.e. print marketing, that according to NAR produces less than 1% of where we find our people and something that actually quantifies as a profit. They were spending over 70% of their resources in something that gave them less than 1% return. Now, as all of you are sitting there going, whoa, that's crazy, no way. My bet is your business has some of the exact same thing inside of it. So when's the last time you looked at your expenses line by line? This doesn't mean that you're broke as a joke. This doesn't mean that you're hurting for money. In fact, if you wait till that point, it might be too late. When's the last time you got so familiar with each line of your expenses that you knew exactly where the money was going, how much return you were getting, and then decided, do I want to continue making that expense? That's Gary's whole point here. Here's what he says, dollar for dollar isn't enough. You understand that if we just get one in return, we're just trading dollars. We're not advancing our business. We're not making our money work for us like Rich Dad Poor Dad, like Kiyosaki teaches. We're just simply trading dollar for dollar. And trading dollar for dollar doesn't advance you or your business. Now, further down, he says, every dollar in your business can be accounted for in this way. Every dollar. Now, it's really easy in this budget model, as I've taken a lot of people through this, it's really easy for them to get hung up on this and say, oh, okay, that makes sense. So I'm going to look in the areas of expense, meaning where I'm advertising, what I'm paying for lead generation. And those are both great places to look. You absolutely should look in those places. Yet this also comes as simple things down to the computers we purchase, the systems I'm paying for on a monthly basis, the people that I'm hiring as leverage inside of my business. Every expense that the business has, you should be inspecting what you expect. You should be looking closely to see for every dollar I spend and invest, what return am I getting? Now, that's what a prudent business owner does. But at the same time, guys, you know as well as I do, most agents aren't necessarily prudent business owners. You understand, most agents are entrepreneurs. They're entrepreneurial. And so they come into this business on their own natural abilities, talents, and skill sets, yet they're not purposeful in how they run their business. This is one of the ways we change from being the average agent to being a millionaire real estate agent. Now, towards the bottom of 153, he's talking about there's three key areas of your budget model. So the budget model in general is where we're looking at each specific piece and expense inside of our business, where every dollar is going, and we're holding that dollar incrementally accountable for a return. Trust everyone's with me. Not complicated so far, and it doesn't have to be complicated, but he breaks it down further for us. He says there's three main areas. Now, the first one is lead with revenue. Lead with revenue. Now, I know you guys have heard this before. I know you've heard lead with revenue before. What does it actually mean? You understand, lead with revenue means that I don't get to spend money until I've made money. Now, if you're like me again, you've watched lots of people get into this business. Lots of people. And those people come in, and what's the first thing they want to do? In their mind, the answer to the question of how do I get business is by spending money. And it doesn't matter what they spend it on. Some people spend it on big things. Some people spend it on a lot of little things. Either way, they're spending money when their business is not set up to even generate any revenue. And what Gary's saying here is leading with revenue means that we're going to inspect the numbers of our business. We're going to be so in tune with the numbers of our business that we're going to know when we're able to take any action in terms of additional leverage, systems, tools, or expense. We're going to know, because by leading with revenue, we let the business tell us when it's the appropriate time. We let the business tell us when it's the appropriate, responsible, prudent time to take on the investment, the person, the system, or the tool. Now, look on the bottom, page 154. He says this. He says, unfortunately, many real estate agents take this same field of dreams approach. If I spend it, they will come. Guys, unfortunately, I've watched lots of really well-intentioned people get into this business, spend a ton of money, and fail out in fair amount of time, sometimes really short order, but they fail out, they burn out. The one commonality is they burn out and they're out of the industry and it cost them a ton of money. It was a big learning lesson. Leading with revenue means I don't spend it until I make it. There are plenty of areas in our business where we can generate revenue that don't require us to spend money to do so. Now, the next one is red light, green light. Now, we referenced this in an earlier video, and I love this visual. Now, if you struggle in this area, you might want to print a little picture of a stoplight. It's that simple. Maybe that's what you need in front of you. If you're an impulsive person, if you're the salesperson's dream, meaning if every time somebody calls you with a pill, potion, or widget that's going to make your life easier and help you make more money and do it in less time, and you just impulsively buy this crap, maybe you need a picture of a little stoplight in front of you. Now, what's the red light, green light concept? Here's what he says. Look on page 155. He says, red light, green light. The problem is holding the money you're spending accountable for results. And what we know is if you're like me, and I'm not throwing rocks, you're just like me, right? What I know is it's easy to get signed up for these tools and systems. Now, why do you guess these vendors put us on monthly contracts versus one big fell swoop? Guys, it's because you don't notice the $20 or $30 a month that's going out of your account, because for most people that aren't looking at their numbers, it's too small to notice. And they don't feel the pain. And so one exercise Gary taught us a long time ago, and I love this concept. He said, look, if you want to get a handle on your expenses in your business, a good best practice every year is to cancel your business credit card. Cancel it every single year. He's not saying don't have a credit card. What's his point? His point is if you cancel your credit card, automatically that cancels payment on all the services. And automatically all those vendors then begin calling and emailing you saying, we're having trouble billing your card. Now, in that exercise, in that process, what you will likely find, yes, it sounds stupid and simple, and I promise you it's incredibly effective. Because if you're like me, and I actually do this, you're going to find things that you had forgotten you'd even signed up for. You were 9-10 months deep into paying $20 to $50 a month. You haven't even logged in to use the service that they're talking about, but there's no way you would have remembered you even signed up for it. Simply canceling that business credit card automatically tells you what's being taken out. Now, red light, green light says this, further down on 155, the last paragraph. When your costs just creep up with no corresponding increase in results, that is when you really have risk. When your costs creep up with no corresponding increase in results. It's easy to increase our costs and our expense in this business. There's always somebody wanting to sell you and I something. What's not as easy and what most people fail to do is hold those things accountable to produce incremental results, a bigger return on the money that we're spending. Now, he goes on to say this, you correct it by pulling out your stop sign and reevaluating that expense. So guys, hear me clearly. Does this take time? Yes. Is it worth it? Yes. Every expense in your business, how frequently are you looking at these numbers? We're going to talk about that, but I want you to think through right now, how frequently, when was the last time you looked line by line on the expenses of your business? When's the last time you looked line by line on your P&L chart? When's the last time? When's the last time you were that familiar with the language and the numbers of your business? And we'll talk more about this. Let's keep going on page 156. 156, he says, stick to the budget, okay? And stick to the budget towards the end of that paragraph, that section, he says this, doing the research to determine how the money in your business should be spent and then not following it can be summed up in 2 words, sheer folly. Now, here's what he's talking about. We know there's a lot of agents that will watch this, hear this, read this, listen to this, whatever. They're going to have this information presented to them in one way, shape, or form. And with that information, they're going to sit there and say, yes, this makes sense. Yes, that's important. Yes, I understand that's a best practice. Absolutely. Yes, 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 yes. And they do nothing with it. Now, my challenge for you is this is where a lot of agents stop. This is where a lot of agents go, oh, I'm not an accountant. Guys, guess what? You don't have to be. You're a business owner. And so this is your duty and your responsibility to your business to know these numbers and inspect them regularly. Now, he talks at the bottom of 156 about the natural rhythm. And he says this, lastly, I want to point out to you that there's a natural monthly rhythm to business, which demands that you examine your books. How often? Underline this part, at least once each month. Now, for some of you, I love you. And for some of you, it's been years. So if that's you, if that describes you, if it's been years since you've done an evaluation of your business numbers. If it's been years, just start with once a month. Don't collect $200. Don't pass go. Do nothing else. Just start looking at those numbers once a month. Become familiar with those numbers one time a month. Now, carry on here in the same paragraph. I'll go so far as to recommend you keep a monthly budget, but address it, underline this, address it on a weekly basis. So you have a monthly budget and you address it on a weekly basis. Now, here's what we know. Here's what he's saying. When you have a monthly budget, you know total month expenses. You know projected total month income. When you have a monthly budget, you have a good idea as to what all the moving parts are, where all the money should be coming from and going out to. You should have that idea. Now, what he's saying is you want to check in on that monthly budget weekly. So again, if it's been years or if you've never, ever done it, don't worry about weekly. Start once a month. Start small. Start with something you can do consistently over time. Build a winnable game. Start somewhere. Ultimate goal is to be looking at your monthly budget weekly. Now, he says why. He asked the question why, because I know a lot of you are asking the same question. Why? And he answers right here, bottom 156, top of 157. Why? Because leading with revenue and red light, green light require you to stay in touch with your spending. Some agents choose to review their financials much more frequently. Now, before we get into the chart on 157, I want to talk about this for a sec. Because throughout my time with KW, I've been so fortunate. It has nothing to do with me. It has everything to do with the power of proximity. Jim Rohn says you become like the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Who's in your inner circle? Well, as a result of being in the company that I am and being surrounded by the people I'm surrounded by, I've been able to be introduced and build relationships with some of the top agents in the country. And I tell you what, that's a privilege and an honor. And it's an incredible thing because I learned so much more from them than I'll ever be able to share. Here's what I know. These people you see on stage, these people that are steady eddies, these people that are top producing agents consistently year over year, they don't have to look at a piece of paper to know their core numbers or the key metrics. They don't have to sit there and stop and wait to see where am I at this month to date. They know their numbers. Now, Cody Gibson, my business partner. Cody jokes all the time that, you know what, it doesn't have to be fancy. For Cody, his thing was Notes app on his phone. And he would keep track of how many deals, how many closings, how many pendings, how many listings, what the expenses were. He would keep track of basic information, his budget model, basic information, which we're about to go through. He would keep track of those things on the Notes app on his phone. Why? Because it was simple, it was easy, and it was some way that he would do it consistently. Guys, it doesn't matter the how you do it. The point is, every top agent I've ever met, every most successful agent I've met, the most successful business people I get the privilege of knowing and meeting, the one thing they all have in common is that they all know their numbers. And they know their numbers because they're inspecting them frequently. Now, I just literally took a picture out of my book, and this is page 157. And instead of trying to talk about it and try to have you look at it, I'm going to use the cursor. And I want to actually walk through some things because this one page, you can see it's dog-eared in my book. This one page fell out of my original MREA book because I reference it so frequently in coaching with agents. This single page could be the most valuable page in this section of the book. Yet it's only valuable if you understand what it's telling you. So let's go through this quickly. We're not going to spend a ton of time here, but I want to go through this quickly because this is really vital for you to understand. Here's what he's saying. Across the top here, you're going to see GCI. That's gross commission income for those that may not know. Gross commission income. Here we go. Look at this. GCI. That's how much money you make. Now, here's what we know. He's broken it up and he's given us some columns, some different thresholds of production. And so you can see the first one is 6 million. 6 million in sales volume on average is around approximately 180 in GCI. That's gross. 10 million production is around 300,000 in GCI gross. 16.7 is around 500,000, 26.7 is around 800,000, and 40 million is around 1.2. Now, here's what we know. These are averages. If you're in a market that the average price is over $1 million, these numbers seem fairly small because it takes you fewer transactions to get there. Now, if you're in a market where the average price is under $200,000, these numbers look really, really big. Keep in mind, these are averages. These are just to give you an idea of percentage. Now, the next thing is cost of sales. And we're going to talk about this and what goes in that category next session more in depth. But cost of sales, in this example right here, let's just keep it simple. The $6 million producer and the $10 million producer, they're both $21,000. And what that number represents for these people, because at this point, you typically don't have leverage. You don't have another person in your business. You typically are the person in your business. And so in this example, in this chart, the 21 is assuming an $18,000 company dollar cap, meaning that's how much you pay your local brokerage, and a franchise fee at KW, which caps at $3,000. That's where this number comes from. If you're not with KW, that's fine. Figure out what your average you're going to pay your broker is, but that's what this number is. Now, the gross profit. Another mistake a lot of agents make here with gross profit is they treat gross profit as profit. And it's not. It's not net profit. Gross profit is top line. Gross profit is what I pay the bills with. Now, gross profit, assuming these numbers up here, you can see he's just deducted. And so we bring down to these new total amounts. Now, here's where this chart becomes very, very valuable, and stick with me because I promise you this chart is incredibly valuable for you. You're going to start to see these percentages, 88% here, 93% here. These percentages represent what percentage of the GCI is gross profit. Now, we get to expenses. And again, we're going to go down in the expense detail here in a bit, but these expenses, they're giving average or ballpark expenditures. The number's not as important for me when I'm coaching people as this percentage, because this percentage gives you a ballpark. It doesn't have to be exact, and it won't be exact, but my point is this. If it should be around 30% and your expenses are 70%, we have a problem. Red light goes on. We stop everything until we inspect what our expenses are, what's not necessary, and we cut that crap out. Now, here's what we also know. Then we get to net income. Then and only then do we get to net income. And guys, this is the visual example. This is exactly what I was talking about before. That agent that grossed a ton of money. Remember up here, they had a ton of GCI. They sold a ton of volume. But because their expenses were out of whack, they net nothing. On paper, they looked like they were rich. They looked like they were rich. Yet their net income was next to nothing because their expenses were out of whack. So these percentages on this chart give you a framework or a ballpark or a best guess to be able to compare your business to. Now, before we get into expense detail, I want to give you an idea of what this looks like. Now, as you know, they're working on rewrite, an MREA 2. Now, what's interesting about this is in talking with a little bit about it with Gary, and I've talked to a few other people that are a part of the research team on it, a majority of the numbers for this book didn't change. That's why you haven't seen the rewrite yet, because they were under the assumption that there was going to be a significant change in the percentages and the numbers and the ratios and all. And what's amazing is most of it hasn't changed. Now, what you're going to see is they're going to add in this expense detail section some things that didn't really exist like it does today. Like there's no internet lead generation line item in the expense detail because when this book was produced, that wasn't really as big of a thing as it is today. So you're going to see them add little things. But again, this expense detail, starting with your business right now today, I promise you can transform your business if you use this tool. Now, what this does, this expense detail does the same thing. This expense detail gives us percentages, and it gives us categories. And it tells us what each category should roughly represent in terms of percentage. You're going to see down here, percentage of gross income. So this number right here, these percentages come down here, and it tells us what percentage of this gross profit number, based on what column I'm in, should represent this category. Now, I trust you're all following me on this, and this is why this is so powerful. We talk about red light, green light, and one of the most commonly asked questions I get from people all the time in coaching is, when is it the right time to hire my first assistant? Or, when is it the right time to hire a buyer's agent? When is it the right time to hire a listing agent? Guys, this sheet, this tool, this single page in your MREA book answers the question for you. And the answer to all of those questions is, when you can still be profitable, maintain your net profit percentage, and still be inside or within reason of these percentages of expense. Now, what do I mean by that? Here's what I mean. If you're a single agent, this $6 million producer right here, and you're making $159, your net income is $99.7. For salaries, you only have 11% to work with. Now, here's what we know. What we know for most market areas, $20,000, which is 11.1% of this net income, or this gross up here, $20,000 is not going to get you a full-time person. And if it does, you probably don't want that person. However, $20,000 could potentially get you a part-time person, or it could potentially get you 2 virtual assistants. This chart tells you when it's okay because your business is going to tell you when it's time. You don't hire until you have the resources to be able to bring on that person. Because when you're using this as a guide, you know you're keeping your business in check, you're keeping your expenditures in check with the average of where they should be based on the MREA research, and you're set to protect your net income. You'll never at that point be the agent who grosses a ton and is broke as a joke. And that's my hope for you. Now, here's what you're also going to know. All of these categories, salaries, lead gen, occupancy, technology, phones, supplies, education and dues, equipment, auto insurance, all of these relate back to something called the MREA chart of accounts. Now, if you're not using QuickBooks in your business, you should be. I'm not a part of QuickBooks. I get nothing for saying that. I don't have a little code to give you to get myself kickback. I don't even know who those people are. I use it in my business because it works, it's simple, and I like it. And I also, because I use QuickBooks, can print out a P&L in real time. It allows me to review those numbers that I'm telling you, that Gary's telling you, you need to be looking at on a weekly basis, if not at least a monthly basis. It makes that possible with the click of a button. Now, the reason this is big is this MREA, this is called the chart of accounts. And a chart of accounts is literally a broken down P&L. And it line items by all of these categories. Now, in your market center, talk to your team leader, talk to your market center administrator if you're with KW, and you can ask them for the MREA chart of accounts. It's a downloadable piece of, I think it's an Excel file, actually, a CSV file, but you can integrate that with your QuickBooks. And in doing so, your QuickBooks now takes on this chart of accounts. And so now these percentages are going to talk. And so now when you're talking to another agent, whether they're twice the production of you, 10 times the production of you, or half the production of you, when we all use the chart of accounts, we're all speaking the same language. And we're comparing apples to apples. Because when it's percentage based, it doesn't matter if somebody does more business than you or less. So keep this in mind, guys. This single page, it is one page that fell out of my original book because I used it so much in consulting agents. This single page will help you take your business to the next level, and it will help you along that way protect your net income, protect your profit. Now, as you can tell, I get a little bit heated about that page. I get a little bit passionate because I love it, and we got to keep moving for time's sake. But again, if you're with KW, talk to your team leader or your market center administrator. Ask them for the MREA chart of accounts. It's a file they can email you, and then you can give it to your accountant or whoever does your QuickBooks to upload into QuickBooks, and it makes these all talk. If you're not with KW, find a local office, call them up and ask them for it. I'm sure they will be happy to email it to you and share it with you. Now, look at the top of page 158. We're going to keep moving here. Keep moving. Top of page 158. Model 4, your organizational model. So we've talked about the budget. And if I haven't lost you so far, and if you're not all completely high C accountant types, and you're just absolutely loving this section, you're probably ready to talk about something other than numbers. And so we're going to go into the organizational model. Now, at top of page 158, under the organizational model heading, he says this, and I'm reading you guys some of my notes. He says this: you do all you can do. You go as far as you can go. You get all the results you can. And when you can't go any further, you look for help. This help should come in the form of a talented person. Now, right there, stop the tracks. Don't go any further. This is where a lot of agents go off the rails. This is where a lot of their businesses go off the tracks because a lot of agents have never led people. A lot of agents have never managed people. And while people leverage is an incredible thing, which it absolutely is, people leverage can transform your business without the shadow, beyond the shadow of a reasonable doubt. It will transform your business. Having a talented person come alongside you will absolutely transform your business. The challenge is most agents aren't willing to grow into the leader they need to become in order to make that a successful relationship. And that's what we're going to talk about here. Now, people are always asking me when or how they'll know it's time to hire their first person, which we talked about. Your business will tell you. Now, Gary goes further here and he says, further down in that paragraph, when you don't have anyone to do that work for you, all the extra stuff is like your second job. So think of this as the agent who gets into the business, and they have 1 or 2 transactions a month pending. And then all of a sudden, they get to 3 or 4 a month pending. And that person feels like, this is insane. I can't keep up with all this. This is literally, my hair's on fire. I'm working too much. I don't know why I got into this business. It's nuts. And then you've got another agent in the same office who's doing 12, 14 deals a month, looking at the person who thinks 4 is nuts, just going, you don't have a clue what's nuts. Guys, every time we grow our business, we're going to feel like it's really fast. We're going to feel like it's a little bit crazy. We're going to feel like it's a little bit nuts. Yet what we know is, until we have the resources, until red light, green light, the numbers of our business tell us it's time to hire the person, that we have the revenue and the resources to bring on another person. Well, until that point, it's your second job. That's what he's saying here. In other words, if you don't have a maid, you are one. I love that sentence. I use it all the time. If you don't have a maid, you are one. If you don't have a lawn man, you are one. And in business, if you don't have an assistant, you are one. Now, this is also, I think, one of the reasons a lot of agents try to fast track this and skip through a lot of the process and go straight to hiring an assistant and hiring a buyer's agent. And the problem with that is they hire them way before they're ready. Not only before their leadership capacity is ready, but before the business is ready to support those people. And you all know agents like this. Maybe some of you listening are watching this. Maybe this is you I'm speaking to. I love you. Maybe this is you I'm speaking to. You've been there. You've felt the pressure. And instead of looking at it as this is still my job and I'm going to push through until the business has the resources to support this and until I have the capacity to support this person, instead of waiting, we knee-jerk react. And unfortunately, what happens more times than not in those situations is the relationship doesn't last. Now, he says in the next paragraph down at the beginning, bottom 158, at the beginning of your real estate career, you are a lead generator, a showing agent, a seller listing agent, a bookkeeper, a runner, a call coordinator, and many other things all in one. Now, here's what we know about that. That's a season. It doesn't have to be your forever. It's a season. Yet it's a season that teaches us so much. And in coaching people through this process, I've seen so much growth through that process. And here's what I mean by that. You can't effectively know who you're looking for in a talent position if you don't understand the position you're hiring for. You don't know what behaviors and skill sets you're looking for if you don't understand what is going to be required of that role inside of your organization. So you being that person, albeit brief, but you being that person is incredibly powerful. It's incredibly powerful for your business because it moves you in the direction of having clarity on what's the role and who specifically am I looking for. Oh, by the way, in that process, when they come on board and they have one of those bad days, it's a heck of a lot better for you at that point because you can come alongside them and say, you know what, I get it. I see my friend Rebecca's on here. You know, you come alongside Rebecca and you'd be like, Rebecca, I get it. I totally get it. I've been there. Like that's a hard part of that job. I get it. And you know what? Here's what I did. Here's what I found. Feel, felt, found. You guys remember that one? I can appreciate how you feel. You know what? I felt the exact same way. And actually what I found was XYZ. Guys, it gives you relatability. You're not just this boss way up on top of this corporate skyscraper. You're somebody who has been in the trenches with them. You understand what it is they do and what you're asking them to do. And it makes you a significantly more effective coach, in my opinion. Now, point number 1 on 159. He says, when doing all you can do, hire administrative help. Just above that, he says, the first person you hire should always be an administrative assistant. Second, you need to hire talent. Now, why would he say it that way? Now, here's what we know. A lot of agents, again, try to skip this. They try to put creativity before models. And again, like we've talked about in so many of these videos so far, you don't get licensed to use your creativity until you've mastered the models. Put your creativity aside. You want to be creative? Go take an art class. You don't get to bring your creativity to your business until you've mastered the models. Now, your first hire is always an administrative assistant. And we're going to talk more about that. We've talked a little bit about it. We're going to talk a lot more about it in the next couple sessions. But the reason for that is that administrative person is phenomenal leverage because they take off of your plate what is more of the 80% activity or the time-sucking activity so that you can spend more of your time in the 20% or dollar-producing activity. The first hire is always an administrative assistant. The other reason it's always an administrative assistant before an agent is because an administrative assistant is paid a salary or an hourly wage. It's a fixed expense, a fixed cost. And when you're in the early stages of your business, That's exactly where you want to be. Low fixed cost. Now, the reason it doesn't work a lot of times when agents rush into hiring buyer agent leverage or listing agent leverage, well, the difference is they're paid on a percentage. And so as the business grows, so does the amount of money that goes out to pay that person. Guys, you have to understand that the approach Gary laid out here is for your own benefit. And it's not because it was his brilliant idea. It's the brilliant idea and what was learned by the people that contributed to this book. Hire an administrative person first. Now, he said, second, you need to hire talent. These are the same people, or they should be. Hiring talent is the key to gaining leverage in your business and your life. Lastly, you'll have to learn to train and consult with your staff. Now, again, here's another opportunity for people to go off the rails, right? So this is where we're going to spend the bulk of the rest of our time today. And when I have somebody in my world, now it doesn't matter if it's a virtual assistant for you. It doesn't matter if it's a full-time executive assistant for you, if it's a listing coordinator for you, transaction coordinator, buyer's agent, seller, does not matter what the role is. Yet when you have any kind of people leverage in your business, the biggest thing we have to do is figure out, how do I effectively lead, coach, and train these individuals? Now, the beauty of this book, they give us a framework for it. Now, on your screen, you're going to see this, and this is actually referenced to what you see on the screen. This talent versus non-talent is actually referenced on 161, and we're going to get to it. But I want to go through this. I think this is huge. Non-talent in a role brings you problems. Talent in a role finds solutions. Non-talent in a role doesn't fulfill your needs and ends up giving you pieces of their job back. That's the number one indicator or red flag that says maybe you didn't make a great hire. Maybe this person is not the talent you thought they were for the role you put them in. When they start giving you pieces of their job back. Talent in the role, otherwise, shares your goals and fulfills your needs as a natural byproduct. A byproduct. It happens without them thinking. A byproduct of fulfilling their own. So when they're on the path to hit their goals, they're automatically helping you achieve yours. Now, number 3, non-talent in a role doesn't know what they want and they're not looking. They're not searching. They're just hanging out. They're going along for the ride. At United Home Group, we call that person a passenger instead of a partner. A passenger is just along for the ride. A passenger's not looking for solutions. A passenger's not looking to make the organization better. A passenger's just there. They're taking up your oxygen. Okay? The flip side of that is they know exactly what they want and they're actively searching to know more. They're learning based. Number 4, non-talent in a role requires pushing. You have to push this person all the time. And if you've ever had somebody like that in your world, it's exhausting. Whereas talent pushes you. You know, the old saying, if I'd always rather have to say whoa than giddy up. It's much easier to pull the reins back on somebody and say, whoa, hold up, Sparky. Like, I love your energy. You're doing great. And let's think about this or talk about this. I'd always rather do that than have to hit somebody with the spurs or kick them with the spurs and say, let's get moving. That's a losing situation every time. Number 5, non-talent in a role may not know where the existing bar is set or even what bar you're talking about. Whereas talent in the role, they're continually raising the bar. They know exactly where it is and they're pushing it higher. Number 6, non-talent in a role doesn't care who they spend time with and they repel talent from them. Guys, have you ever taken 2 magnets and you put them, instead of reverse, you put them the same polarity? What do? They repel. You cannot, if they're strong magnets, you cannot for the life of you push them completely all the way together. This is what non-talent does in your organization. Non-talent in your world will absolutely repel or push out talented people around you. Whereas talent in a role, they demand to be associated with talent and they attract other talent to them. You understand that talent has a high bar, a high standard, and anything less than that just doesn't cut it. Number 7, non-talent in a role. When they try to talk action and results, they can't back it up. All talk, no action. All bark, no bite. Whereas talent in a role talks language of action and results. You know who I'm talking about. You know that person who talks a great game. And then when you peel back all the layers of the onion and you look at actually what's there, you go, ugh, that's not cool. Hopefully that's not you in your business. My point is talent versus non-talent. This is what Gary's talking about. This is why going through the process of hiring is so important. Because your business is too important to let non-talent into your world. Now, on 159 on the bottom, under point 1, he says, when you're doing all you can do, hire administrative help. Adding staff members is just one of 3 ways you can add leverage to your sales business. Besides people leverage, you could also turn to systems or tools, which we've talked a little bit about in previous videos. While traditional thinking would have you put systems in place to push you further along, we've discovered a problem with that thinking. Now, we as the people who contributed this book. Designing and implementing systems takes more time than you think and very specific skills. For most real estate agents, trying to put multiple systems in place by yourself will actually reduce productivity. If you're like most agents, your highest and best use is not creating and implementing systems. Yet there's somebody that needs to be in your world whose it is. Find that person. That's exactly what he's saying here. 160, the top. What we've learned is that the best way to put systems in place is to hire a person with the skills to document and later implement your systems. So what he's saying is, I'm going to bring somebody in. I'm going to have them observe and evaluate. I'm going to have them document what I do organically, how I just do things, because if you're like most agents, you don't have it documented. But I'm going to hire somebody to come in, observe, and document, because what they're creating in that process is my system. And then their job is to implement it and carry it forward throughout the growth of the organization. Further on in that 160 page, at first I thought the agents who didn't document their systems were the oddballs. Now I know the truth. The agents who did document their systems were. All right, where are you spending your time? That's his whole point. Where are you spending your time? How are you investing that time? And what kind of a return are you getting on your time? You understand this all comes back to red light, green light. This all comes back to it. Now, top of page 161, point 2, hire talent. Hire talent. This is the second part of that. In that top paragraph, he says this: we say people and talent when they're a superb match for the criteria you've established for a particular position. When they're a superb match, not an okay match, a superb match. Another mistake a lot of people make in terms of people leverage is they settle. They settle. Either they don't know what questions to ask, or they're so desperate for help. They're feeling the burden of the load of pressure on them, and they're just looking for a pressure relief valve. They're just looking for a Band-Aid. And unfortunately, that's what they get almost every time until they go through the process to find somebody who is a superb match, as he just said here. Keeps going there. By this, we mean their natural abilities, skills, experience, and aspirations all line up around the job description and give them every reason to succeed at a very high level. This allows you to judge people against clear criteria instead of judging them as people. Underline that last sentence. I'm going to read it again. This allows you to judge people against clear criteria instead of judging them as people. A candidate is therefore either a great fit or not a great fit for the job, rather than being a good or bad person. Guys, you understand that you can have incredibly great people, people that other people love to death, people who are absolutely fantastic people that you would want to go hang out with, you'd want to spend time with at events or functions. They're great people, and yet if they're in the wrong role, it's a bad fit. It doesn't mean it's a bad person. It means it's a bad fit. Now, 161 again is what you're looking at on the screen. It's this talent versus non-talent. This is key, guys. I literally, when I was a team leader, I had this printed up at my desk all the time because I was always on the look for talent. And so having this in front of me just to scan through and always as a constant reminder, how is this person showing up? This person that I'm evaluating or looking at, not to see if they're a good or bad person, but are they potentially a good or bad fit for a specific role? How do they show up? And I take myself through this process. I take myself through this chart. And very quickly, I was able to build the muscle and the mindset and the skill set of better identifying talent versus non-talent. Now look on page 162. When you work with them, talent's is about as inconspicuous as a mighty redwood in the field of Christmas trees. That talent stands out. Now you've seen this too. Guys, I've said this before. In a sea of average, talent glows in the dark. Talent stands out big time. It's exactly what Gary is seeing here. Further down, he said this. He said, I've heard at real estate seminars and classes on the subject can be boiled down to this philosophy: how little I can pay someone and not have them leave. I'd like to advocate the exact opposite, Gary says. When you make it your business to hire talent, I want you to ask yourself, how much can I afford to pay them so I can keep them as long as possible? Guys, again, a conversation with Cody Gibson. We were involved in a number of things together. But his philosophy from the beginning, since I've known him years ago, has always been, I want to pay my people as much as I possibly can because talent deserves it. Talent deserves it. I don't want somebody that I can pay as little as I possibly can to because I'm going to get that kind of talent. So again, don't fast track it. Don't settle for anything. If your business isn't ready to hire talent, find a different solution in the stopgap. Grow your business, your units, and your volume so that the revenue is generated to be able to afford high-level talent. Now, bottom 162, he says this: the truth is that a bad hire will not only cost you money, it will also cost you opportunities. And on 163, he actually goes through the cost of a bad hire. And this is fantastic, guys, and we don't have a ton of time to go through all this, but hear me clearly. The cost of a bad hire completely outweighs the pain of slowing down and going through the process of ensuring a good one. The cost of a bad hire is massive in terms of time, resources, stress, energy, all of the above. The cost of a bad hire is terrible. Now, I'm sure some of you have experienced that. If you have not yet, you're about to, or you will at some point. My hope for you is that you learn from it. Now, page 164. Page 164, train and consult. Now, again, I've done about an hour and 20-minute class on this before, so we have 15 minutes to get through this, right? So you're not gonna leave here certified experts in this. However, I want you to know where this is and what the general concepts are so you can begin to start your learning process around this. If this is going to be something in your world, if people leverage is going to be a reality in your world at some time in the near future, this area is one that you really need to spend some time focusing on. Now, he says under the training consultant, page 164, he says the last key area of your organizational model is training and consulting. What you pay talent to help you makes up a huge percentage of your annual cost. It's one of the biggest. People are typically one of the biggest expenditures any business has. Okay, that wasn't in here, that was me. He goes on to say, so you always want to make sure that you get the most out of your people investment. People are almost always the biggest line item expense of any organization. Almost always. It doesn't matter the industry. Does not matter. They're almost always the biggest expense. Yet, most agents and a lot of industries and companies don't pour in the time, resources, or energy into developing that asset. When we see people as an asset, when we see people as a big expense and an incredible asset, we will invest time, resources, and energy into developing their abilities and their talents. Now, John Maxwell, I'm a certified John Maxwell coach, and I love what he said about this. He said this. He said he's heard a lot of people say, well, I don't really want to train my people too much because what if I train them and they leave? And John smiles. I've heard him say this twice. He smiles every time. He smiles. And he said, I think there's a bigger problem there. I said, what? And he said, I think the bigger problem would be if you don't train them and they stay. Guys, we can't be so afraid. We can't be based in scarcity that we don't develop our people, send them to classes, grow their skill sets, pour into them as human beings. We can't not develop our people because we're afraid they might leave us. Because what John's saying is, what's worse than that is that we don't train them and they stay. Check your mindset on your people. This training, coaching, and consulting of your people is absolutely crucial to making sure you get the maximum return on one of your biggest expenses as your business grows. Now, he goes through on the next couple pages, 164, 165, and he gives us some basic frameworks of what this should look like. Now, look at 165, the middle of the page, right underneath figure 24. This is one of my absolute favorite pieces here, is this. He says these agents, he's talking about agents who conduct training for only a short period of time, for a new employee, or they skip it altogether. He said, these agents are practicing seagull management. Seagull management. They do very little training, or none at all. And then all they do is swoop in, make a lot of noise, dump on people, and fly off. Is it any wonder they can't find or keep talent to work for them? Guys, don't be a seagull manager. If that's your tendency, find somebody else to take care of managing your people. Don't be a seagull manager. Now he goes on, and he gives a couple other great pieces that I want to look at and highlight. Page 166. On page 166, figure 25, at the bottom of 166, he gives us the 10 principles for empowering people. And I want to pause here and spend a little bit of time here because this is incredibly important. If you're lucky and fortunate enough to find and hire talent into your organization, you're already ahead of a lot of your competition. So if you get that far and you find and hire talent into your organization, the biggest tragedy at that point could be not empowering them. Because by not empowering talented people, you're not getting the benefit of their talent. Empowering people is what this is all about. Finding talent, giving them control, giving them authority, giving them good training, making sure they're real clear on what the lanes are that they need to stay inside of, and then empowering them to go do that job in your organization is the truest form of leverage. And unfortunately, a lot of agents, because again, maybe it's just due to lack of experience in managing people, but a lot of agents, when they get people leverage, they still micromanage. They don't ever let go of these pieces. And so they never really truly get the benefit of having people leverage. Empower your people. He gives 10 principles there that are phenomenal. They in themselves could be a whole other class. But look on page 167, and this is where we're going to pretty much wrap up our time today. Page 167, the biggest pushback I've ever had in 14 years of doing this and coaching agents. Biggest pushback I ever had was, I don't want to hire somebody because I don't want to have to be a manager. I don't want to have to be a boss. And when we really peel back those objections, we really look closely, we get really granular, what the objection really is I don't know how to coach, train, and lead them once I have them. It's not that they don't want the help. It's not that they don't want the leverage. It's that they don't know what to do with it when they have it. And so on page 167, he gives you the consultative interview figure, figure 26. Now, guys, let me tell you a story. When I first started even getting into a position, I wouldn't even call it coaching, but just consulting and helping people in their real estate business, I had no idea what I was doing. Shocker. I had no idea what I was doing. I'd never done it before. I'd sold real estate. I had good success there. I'd run an office, but I'd never coached somebody. How do you get results from or out of somebody? How do we get people moving in the direction of accomplishing their goals? That's the question. And that's what terrifies a lot of agents and keeps a lot of agents from hiring people and building a business. However, figure 26 gives you the simplest, most effective model I've found in about 12 years of coaching. So here it is. Number one, what was your goal? Now, mind you, you're not just coaching salespeople. If you have an administrative assistant, you should be going through this process weekly with them using their 411. If you have a buyer's agent, transaction coordinator, listing agent, it does not matter the role. This is the process each week that my one-on-one meeting with them looks like. So number one was, what was the goal? And they tell you. You don't tell them. You ask questions and listen. What was your goal? They tell you. Second question, okay, how'd you do? So my goal was to go on 10 appointments. Great. Yep, that's right. I remember that. Perfect. So tell me, how'd you do on that goal? Well, I only went on 3. Okay. Third question, how do you feel about that? Now, why in the world are we asking them, how do you feel about that? Remember, guys, logic makes people think. Emotion makes them act. We have to get them into feeling. We have to get them to think about how it makes them feel. Now, if I'm the agent and I said my goal was 10, and you asked me the question, how did it go? And I said 3, and then you asked me the question, how do you feel about that? I'm going to say, I think that sucks. I don't like it. That's off pace. It wasn't a good week. Now, number 4 is the key, because a lot of people chicken out even asking 3. If they do, they stop there. 4 is the key. 4 is based on how you did. What is your goal and what do you need to do now? You understand that everybody can have an off week. An administrative assistant could be working on a project. They got pulled sideways because of something that you couldn't have foreseen coming up. That's okay. That's life. That's why we have these meetings weekly. And we ask them the question, what was your goal? How did you do? How did you feel about that? Based on that, what do we need to do this week moving forward? And then you're going to see there's two options. Choose your own adventure. If we go down to the left, is there anything that might keep you from doing that? What might get in the way this week of you accomplishing that? So your goal was this, you did this, you don't like the fact that you're short of goal. What do we need to do this week? They author it. If they author it, they own it. If you give them the solution, they're not going to do it. So when you go through this process, you have to get really good at asking the questions, not giving the answers. So I'm going to ask them, what are you going to do this week that's different than last week that's going to get you a different result? And they're going to give you the answer. And then I'm going to ask them, is there anything that might keep you or prevent you from doing that this week? And they're going to say one of 2 things, yes or no. The other question asked there, if you needed training or support to do this, what might it be? Now, if in your book you're taking notes and highlighting, that last question, bottom right of figure 26, is crucial. Because sometimes it's going to be a skill issue. Sometimes it absolutely will be a skill issue. Yet oftentimes what I found is it could be a system or a training issue. Maybe they just don't understand a system they have access to. Maybe they're not using a tool or a leverage tool that you're already purchasing or the business already has. Maybe they're not using it at a high level. But these are the questions we're going to ask to really figure that out, to unpack that, to get really granular there, to then help work with them so they author their plan or their path forward. What does it need to look like? What's going to get in your way? And is there any training or support that I can help get you this week that's going to move the needle for you in that direction? Now, page 168. Top of page 168 is this. It says the first step to take when people are underperforming over time is to shift gears from the normal consultative interview and get their agreement that a problem exists. Until you have agreement with them or from them that a problem exists, nothing is going to change. Nothing is going to matter. If they're owning the results they're currently getting, like we all earn our outcome. We all earn our outcome. And until they realize there's a problem with the outcome, nothing's going to change. So we have to get them to see that a problem exists. This should be done in private. Underline that. Again, remember, reward in public, correct in private. We never have these chastising meetings in a public setting. We praise in public. That's why these meetings are one-on-one, because they allow us to have good one-on-one discussion when maybe it's not going to be positive. Maybe it's going to be you failed this week. Maybe it's going to be you let yourself down this week. Maybe it's going to be you're opening up to me about an area you're not good at yet and you want to get better at. That's going to be done and more constructive if it's done in private. Now, further down page 168, he says this: the truth is you need two sets of meetings to be effective. Here's what we're talking about: a team meeting to share information and common goals, and a private one-on-one meeting to address personal performance. In addressing personal performance, if there is a problem, you're first seeking their agreement that an actual problem exists. Further down. Next, ask how they see the problem, and then they honestly share your perspective. Depending on the situation, you may need to discuss the consequences for them if there's no change in the situation. You should seek an agreement. Underline seek an agreement. You should seek an agreement on what you both want to see happen. This short-term goal could be put in writing. A big part of the process is discussing alternate solutions. Here's a couple great questions. These are money questions for you. How are we going to solve this problem? And then shut up and listen. Let them know you're willing to participate in the process and get their ideas on how to fix it. Again, though, they're authoring the solution. If they author it, they own it. Towards the bottom of 168, the point of the discussion is to arrive at a mutually agreeable course of action. This needs to be specific, not general, specific, and should spell out expectations, responsibilities, and timelines. Again, write it down. Now, page 169, he carries through that. Bottom line, that last section on the middle of 169 says this: as an ongoing reminder, think of your organizational model this way: talent to shine, systems to define, train and consult to refine. Guys, hiring talent is such an incredibly important part of your organizational model. And then once you hire them, you have to know what to do with them. So that consultative interview, if you've never done this before, or maybe you need to just stop doing it your way and you just need to use this way, that's okay. I promise you, this simple consultative interview process will get you different results than you're getting now. And oh, by the way, let's pretend you don't have a team, you don't have anybody else, but you want to get different results for yourself. Find somebody else who is a peer who will hold you able. They'll hold you able to do the work you need to do. Not somebody that is going to love you out of the business. Not somebody that's going to listen to and take all of your excuses as to why you're not doing what you need to do. Find somebody that will hold you accountable and go through this process with each other. Take each other through that consultative interview process one time a week. Watch what happens to your business. All right, guys. That wraps up our last two of the four models. Next session will be session number 6 next week. We'll be going deep into the MREA economic model. That's going to be on pages 172 through 184. Again, next session, session 6, pages 172 through 184. Looking forward to seeing you guys next week. Now, be sure to check the Facebook Mastermind group. I've posted lots of tools from these 4 models in there for you guys to utilize today, starting today in your business. Excel spreadsheets, PDF worksheets, lots of tools you can use either by yourself or with the people in your business. Get clarity, dive into these 4 models, and join us next week when we go deep into the economic model, MREA, pages 172 through 184. 4. Thanks, guys, for being on with us today. Look forward to seeing you soon. Bye-bye.